And that's about all you're getting as far as a James Bond experience out of this game. So let's just jump right into it. This is my review of 007 First Light on PS5. So first, let's just talk a little bit about the game. 007 First Light is a thrilling espionage action-adventure game where you follow James Bond as a young, resourceful, and sometimes reckless recruit in MI6's training program, and discover an origin story of the world's most famous spy. After a heroic act, young naval air crewman James Bond is offered to join the newly revived 00 program. But when a mission to stop a rogue agent ends in tragedy, he must join forces with his reluctant mentor Greenway to expose a deep conspiracy and stop a looming coup at the heart of the state. So yeah, that's the premise of the story here. And I'm just telling you guys right now, this story was written in a way to tell you exactly what world you're living in today in real life and what's next to come with AI tech. You basically have to stop Peter Thiel from using Palantir for nefarious means. That's the premise of the game in a nutshell. And not to mention, besides James Bond and Q being somewhat accurate to the Bond lore, the rest of the characters were either gender swapped or race swapped. M is an Indian woman, Moneypenny is a mixed race Gen Z girl boss in parachute pants, and your mentor is Morgan from The Walking Dead. And then in the entire MI6 building, you'll be hard pressed to find any actual British people there. I mean, you seem to have every other race on Earth at MI6, except British men specifically. And I mean, I guess it's pretty accurate to real life at this point. I shouldn't expect to see British people in Britain anymore. My mistake. It really just comes off as a parody of James Bond more than an actual James Bond property because of this. And also because James doesn't seem like himself most of the time. Because the actor that plays James looks more akin to Tom Cruise from the first Top Gun movie. So after a while, I felt more like I was playing a Jack Reacher game than a James Bond game. Because he really does look like Tom Cruise from different angles. Somebody called Tim Heidecker and let him know they finally swapped James Bond for Tom Cruise. He should be pretty happy about it. And of course, James is constantly getting berated and told what to do by the many girl bosses he has to deal with.
I am putting a lot of trust in you. Don't you dare disappoint me.
How dare you?
And it's James Bond, so he has to at least get with a girl at some point. But other than that, he's just constantly getting ordered around and shown up by the girl bosses around him. And the biggest travesty of all is that he drinks numerous drinks throughout the game, but only once is his martini, shaken not stirred, even referenced. I understand that this is supposed to be young James, but the game takes place in modern day, so James just comes off as a yes mom kind of guy. And yeah, don't get me started on how they say ma'am in this game.
Excuse me, it's ma'am. It is ma'am.
Because it's like James is purposely saying yes mom, like yes mommy, yes mom. It gets pretty intolerable fast.
It's been a pleasure, Mom.
Blown covers?
I wouldn't know, Mom.
Also none. There's no need.
Mom.
And obviously this game is supposed to be the origin story of James Bond, but it also takes place in modern day, so it's also like a reboot of a series in my opinion. And I think this is the type of movie we would have gotten if they made a James Bond movie in the last few years, which is to say it would have been super woke and sucked. Because it comes off like they couldn't get the movie greenlit, so they just said fuck it and made a game out of it. That's actually how the entire experience feels, like a rushed together project that they just wanted to get out the door. I'll explain more on why I think that in the gameplay section, as the entire experience feels rushed and lacking. So 007 First Light was developed and published by IO Interactive, the same developers responsible for the Hitman series, which is fun. I love Hitman World of Assassination. And this game is powered by the Glacier game engine. And Glacier is a proprietary in-house game engine developed for the Hitman series by IO Interactive. And I do love that IO Interactive used their own in-house game engine, and it looks and works great with the Hitman games, so you'd think it would be a perfect match for James Bond, but it did not translate well here at all. So let's move on to the good aspects of the gameplay. When the combat works, it can be a pretty fun experience. The headshots feel good, as well as taking out 3 guys by knocking out the first one and taking his gun, shooting the second one in the leg, and shooting the third in the hand to knock his gun out while knocking them both out in the process. That is pretty cool how you can chain those little things together. and you have access to multiple weapons including pistols, shotguns, SMGs, assault rifles, sniper rifles, and a few others that you get from enemies. And finding ways to use your gadget watch to get past enemies can be pretty entertaining, because you can make someone sick by hitting them with a toxic dart, or unlock a door with your laser watch, and much more. The gadgets are essential for each mission, and you're able to choose which gadgets you want to bring with you for the mission. And you can choose between the dart phone, smoke pod, shockwave camera, laser strap, flash mine, or the missile pen. And these all have their strengths and weaknesses, and will determine how your playthrough of that mission will go, and what types of strategies you'll employ to get the job done. And you also have this thing called the Instinct system, which gives you access to things like bluffs, lures, confrontations, and focus. So like if someone notices you, you can use a bluff to explain to them how you belong there and they shouldn't worry, that type of thing. But bluffs won't work on higher level guards, so instead you have to maneuver around them with things like lures, which gets them to come over to you so you can take them out. And then you can slow down time using your focus, but I barely used it, honestly. The game was easy enough to not have to, but it can be fun to go slow-mo bullet time and take everybody out. Well, that's all I got for the good aspects of the gameplay, so let's move on to the bad aspects of the gameplay. Most of the time, the combat and stealth are janky at best. The stealth mechanics in particular are not well done here. You just walk behind something for cover. Sometimes he'll stay, sometimes he won't. Sometimes somebody on the other side of the box will see you, sometimes they won't. There's not much rhyme or reason as to why. Sometimes you can be standing directly next to a guy and he won't see you. And then other times they'll turn around and notice you when you're crouched not making noise behind him. So this became very frustrating the more I played the game, until I realized that there's no penalty for not using stealth. And at that point, I just started walking into rooms and killing everyone in there, because it was way more fun, and it was the difference between getting through the room in 3 minutes or 20 minutes. And that's an easy decision for me, guys. So yeah, the second half of the game, I just completely abandoned all stealth because it wasn't fun to utilize, and I had a way better time running and gunning my way through the levels. But unfortunately, the gunplay isn't much better, because it can feel good getting headshots and things, but it's nothing you haven't experienced many times already in so many other games that did it better. It's like a worse Hitman mixed with Uncharted gunplay. Nothing really fun about it and very easy, so no skill involved. And then the hand-to-hand combat has the most jank of anything in the game, because you have to be perfectly lined up for the animations to catch how they're supposed to. But you also can't lock onto enemies, so when you're surrounded by a few, you don't know what the hell is going on. So then you try to grab someone, and then you just grab right through them because some animation wasn't done yet. Nothing about it feels fluid, and it actually feels more akin to the hand-to-hand combat in the old Bourne Conspiracy game on Xbox 360. That's what I got from it. It's kinda cool when it works, but it rarely works as intended, so you just end up with wonky looking fighting and many frustrations. And then the few driving sections of the game that you get to play are brain dead levels. It's just a gimmick here, because you just drive straight, hold the right trigger and square or X to keep shooting. That's it. It basically drives itself, so these sections are very boring. And then of course you got lots of cutscenes. I mean, obviously because it's meant to be a sort of movie game, as it's James Bond and all, but with all the insufferable characters, and James constantly saying, "Yes, mommy, yes, mommy, yes, mom, yes, mom." You just want to get back to the action, for which is very few and far between. So in some ways, you have to go out of your way to get the action you're looking for in this game, such as disregarding stealth in favor of gunfights for any kind of fun. So like I said before, this game is essentially a watered down Hitman that's mostly on rails. And the whole time you're playing this game, you keep thinking, I just want to go play Hitman World of Assassination because it's so much better. And then if you own the Hitman game, you will, because it's fun and has a ton of features and mechanics that this game lacks. And speaking of lacking features, 007 First Light only has 2 game modes. Story mode, which will take you about 15 to 20 hours depending on what you do in game. And then there's tactical simulations that you can do for a few costume and skin unlocks. They're basically just running through missions and doing the objectives that they tell you to do. That's it. Nothing else to do in the game right now. And you would think there'd be some kind of freelance mode like they have in Hitman to keep you playing, but nope, there's nothing. So maybe 30 hours of gameplay for all content tops, and that's pushing it. So to summarize the gameplay as a whole was very disappointing, as I was hoping to see an evolution of the Hitman style gameplay, but instead we got a watered down woke Hitman on rails. I mean, there was no fun to be had with the stealth mechanics, no fun to be had in the hand-to-hand combat, no fun to be had with the vehicle combat, and very limited fun to be had with the gunplay and gadgets in this game. Not to mention there only being 2 game modes with minimal content. This was just a very underwhelming, woke, boring abomination of the James Bond brand. And it's very telling where this company and the James Bond franchise are heading, and it's not looking good. Alright, moving on to the good aspects of the visuals. I don't really have much good to say about the visuals here either. Some of the car assets and even some surface textures up close look very lifelike, but that's about all the positives I got. So with that being said, we'll move on to the bad aspects of the visuals. I was playing on base PS5, so this game may look a lot better on a top-end gaming PC, but for me, it was terrible. And there are moments here and there where the graphics look pretty good, but most of the time, something graphical was going awry. From texture pop-ins to blurry hair to weird light flashes, it was a pretty bad experience. This game is not well optimized, and it shows. Because it comes off as one of those games that they just left the optimization to NVIDIA DLSS and said fuck it. So if you're playing on base PS5, you'll see the blurry textures and there's nothing you can do about it. And I actually got this game on PS5 because I thought it would be better optimized so I wouldn't have to mess with my graphics settings on PC to dial it in. But boy was I wrong. It looked really bad on PS5. Some of the backgrounds in the world look straight up 10 years old or more. I'm not even lying. For instance, in the Vietnam level, the boats and water in the distance are some of the worst I've seen in years. It really does look like a PS3 game in the background sometimes. It's sad that somehow this game looks worse than Hitman World of Assassination. I really don't know how that's possible, but they pulled it off. And then you have the weird character choices, gender and race swaps, and girl bosses wearing inappropriate clothing for such a job as MI6. And I'm probably showing you some clips right now so you can see what I'm talking about. I mean, Moneypenny looks like she's straight out of the last Saints Row game. It's out of place and out of character for the Bond-verse. So to summarize the visuals, overall this game is a mess visually, at least on PS5. This game clearly hasn't been optimized and relies heavily on NVIDIA DLSS to get by. And the background textures are some of the worst I've seen in years. It really does look straight out of a PS3 game. And the choice of characters and their attire is not at all what you'd expect in the Bond-verse, and it just makes you feel more like Jack Reacher than James Bond. So moving on to the good aspects of the sound. They definitely make use of the James Bond audio library here in this game. I mean, you have your new Bond theme song for the game, along with the original Bond theme music, as well as the little quips of horns and nostalgia that makes the James Bond experience feel special. And they do a good job of using the music and sounds when it calls for it. But it's the only thing that reminds you you're James Bond and not Jack Reacher. And the sound effects were pretty good here too, with guns and gadgets sounding pretty accurate, as well as the atmospheric sounds going together to form a nice ambiance while playing. So they did a good job here with the sound overall. Alright, moving on to the bad aspects of the sound. The music and sound effects are done well here, but it's hurt by the fact that it's the only thing that makes you realize you're playing a James Bond game, and not Jack Reacher. Because if you just went by the characters in the game, you'd have no clue you were playing a James Bond game, as the characters are all gender and race swapped, besides Bond and Q. So it feels more like Jack Reacher, and the only time you remember is when the Bond music kicks in and you're like, oh yeah, that's right, I'm Bond, James Bond. And then he says, yes mom, yes mommy, yes mom, to some girl boss, and you're like, you're not James Bond, man. You're a doppelganger, and if Sean Connery were here, he'd make you get him a dry martini, shaken, not stirred, and then he'd backhand the shit out of you while stealing your girl. You know what I'm saying? That's what real James Bond would do, but no, we have this guy, Jack Reacher, played by Tom Cruise. And I like Tom Cruise, but he's not Bond, even though Tim Heidecker would disagree. So I put this all here in the bad section of sound because it really does affect your experience in a negative way. And I say that because every time you hear the actual Bond music and horns, you just remember that you're playing this watered down Hitman version on rails of James Bond, who's more akin to Jack Reacher, and you're not actually playing a James Bond game. And then you get a sad feeling in the pit of your stomach. So to summarize the sound, even though all of the Bond songs and sounds are there, the only purpose it serves is to remind you that you're not actually playing a James Bond game. Because nothing about the game besides your gadget watch is really James Bond, and everything screams Jack Reacher. Even the James Bond character looks like young Tom Cruise, so when the Bond music kicks in, it just gives you a confusing feeling and makes you wish you were actually playing as James Bond, but unfortunately, you're not. So as weird as that is, because the music and sound are done so well, it hurts the experience because nothing else about the game is James Bond, which leaves you confused and serves as a reminder that you're not actually playing as James Bond. Alright, so with that being said, let me move on to my final thoughts. I went into this game expecting it to be a watered down Hitman game, but it was somehow even worse than that. And when I say watered down, I mean I expected that you wouldn't be able to be as brutal as you are in Hitman games, due to being James Bond, which was fine. But what I didn't expect was for it to look worse than Hitman somehow, as well as have a level of jankiness to the combat that felt like they didn't know what the fuck they were doing with their own in-house game engine. That's not to mention the absolutely abysmal optimization of this game. And the gameplay loop gets boring fast, and then you're just left with cutscenes of a world that tries to convince you that it's James Bond, but can't shake that Jack Reacher feel. Bond looks and acts like Jack Reacher more than James Bond, definitely. Most of the main side characters have been gender or race swapped, so nothing looks or feels James Bond, or even British for that matter, seeing as you're hard pressed to find any actual British people, especially men, working at MI6. And like I said, I guess that's kinda accurate to modern day, as I'd probably find an Indian woman heading MI6 in real life, as well as a Gen Z girl boss as my handler. It's actually very accurate to real life, so I guess they nailed it in that sense. So when you put everything together in this game, it ends up being a very disappointing experience. Even if the gameplay wasn't that great, at least give us a decent Bond story that's lore accurate, not James Bond starring the cast of Saints Row and featuring Morgan from Walking Dead. And vice versa. If you're gonna give me a modern woke rendition of James Bond that doesn't make any sense, at least make the gameplay loop fun, but they couldn't even do that. There's barely any content to be had here, and there's even less if you remove the on-rails walking and cutscenes. So the overall experience here is not a good one, and if you really want to know what happens, just watch a YouTube video with all the cutscenes and save yourself the trouble. Or just go play Hitman World of Assassination instead. At least you get your money's worth with that game. So with all that being said, should you buy this game? No! Hell no, you shouldn't buy this game. It's definitely not worth $70. Hell, this game's not really even worth $10. You can completely skip this one and not miss a damn thing. This is your opportunity to save yourself the horror, because playing this game will do damage to how you view the Bond character. Akin to how you can't unsee Luke Skywalker drinking the alien milk, same here. Once you experience it, it leaves a bad taste in your mouth. All pun intended. So just stay clear away from this one, guys. You're not missing a damn thing. Well, that was my review of 007 First Light. I'm just glad it's over. It's unfortunate it played out that way, but I'm just glad it's over and I'm ready to move on. Stick a fork in the Bond franchise at this point, boys. They're cooked. They're done. If this is the direction they're heading, then it's over. But anyways, guys, let me know what you think down below. Did you like this game? Did you not like this game if you guys have played it? Are you planning on picking this game up? Did you want to check it out? Let me know in the comments below. But until next time, guys, I'll be seeing ya!